talk organized by the World Trade Center. World Trade Centers Bengaluru, Chennai, and Kochi. We are doing this together with the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, FIEO, the Southern region, the Forum of Free Enterprises, and Khaitan and Co. as our knowledge partner. My name is Vivek George and representing the World Trade Centers. The Union Budget 25-26 has been presented by the Honorable FM last Saturday. What is now being hailed as a common man's budget, the budget today is all over the news for different reasons. The Union Budget, of course, promises to be growth oriented and continues with the government effort to secure inclusive development across all sectors. This particular session, the post-budget talk, is an annual event of us, and we are really delighted to partner with FIEO every year to present this session to you. And we are even more delighted to have Mr. Homi P. Ranina, the eminent tax expert and the senior lawyer of Supreme Court of India, as a keynote speaker. This has been a practice for many years now, and we are really glad that we can continue. And we are presenting this today along with Mr. Ranina and other subject matter experts. The detailed introduction, the profile of the speaker is already with you. Mr. Ranina is one of the foremost tax consultants in the country with over 4 decades of experience. He has earlier had a stint as the director of RBI, and he continues to be on the board of many companies. He is also an author, and he has authored several books around the taxation. Mr. Ranina is also a trustee at the Nani Palkiwala Memorial Trust. So on behalf of the organizing team and the participants, I extend a warm welcome to Mr. Homi P. Ranina. Next, we have Mr. P. Gopalakrishnan. Gopalakrishnan, in fact, is the present chairman of FIEO for the Southern region. We are delighted to have him joining us. And Mr. Gopalakrishnan is also the managing director of Metro Group of Companies. He is from the textile industry, and he has been, a very active industrialist in textile sector as well as in other industries. And with FIEO, as the leadership of FIEO, he continues to drive growth across sectors. So thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, for tuning in. I welcome you as well as Mr. Unnikrishnan, who is the Joint Director General for FIEO, and all their members to this webinar.
Good evening.
We are really delighted to have 2 experts from Khaitan and Co. So Khaitan and Co. has been supporting our events over the last 1 year. In fact, I still remember Brijesh attending and speaking on his thoughts on the last budget at WTC. So we are really delighted to have Brijesh back at our forum. So Brijesh Kothary is the partner for indirect taxes at Khaitan and Co. And he has been quite supportive in all the World Trade Center events with Khaitan and Co. as well as in his earlier stint with the LKS. And he is a subject matter expert when it comes to matters of indirect tax. He's also a lawyer. So we are really delighted to have Brijesh joining here along with his colleague Chitrat Gupta, who is a senior associate at Khaitan and Co. So Brijesh and Chitrat, indeed a pleasure to have you back. Welcome to this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me welcome all the participants. I hope today's program will be useful to you. Please put in your questions in the Q&A box. We would be taking it as we progress. Anything to do with indirect tax, I request our experts from Khaitan and Co. They will be addressing it live online. And please do feel free to use the Q&A box. If you need anything else, you can ping me on the chat box. With that, I now request Mr. Gopalakrishnan from FIEO for the introductory remarks. Over to you, sir.
Dignitaries, the speakers and the participants, very good evening. It is an honor to address you today as we discuss the much anticipated Union Budget and its impact on MSMEs, exports, and India's economic growth. Every year when the budget is presented, every Indian, be it an entrepreneur, exporter, professional, or job seeker, eagerly waits to understand what is in it for them, and how it will shape their future. This year is no different, and with the global trade landscape shifting in India's favor, MSMEs were expecting policies and schemes that could help leverage these opportunities. Opportunities for Indian industries in this budget, like we are at a crucial moment where global and domestic factors are aligning to create immense possibilities for Indian businesses. The US and EU evolving trade stance against China, political uncertainty in Bangladesh, and rising domestic consumption are all opening new avenues for growth. This is the time for Indian MSMEs and exporters to step up and take advantage of these conditions. The Union Budget 25-26, released 2 days back, has laid a strong foundation for India's economic growth. It focuses on 4 key pillars: foreign trade and exports, manufacturing growth, infrastructure development, employment generation. These strategic initiatives are expected to significantly enhance India's global competitiveness and drive sustainable economic growth. So, in my view, I want to highlight few announcements in this budget. One is export promotion mission. A dedicated export promotion mission will be established to streamline export procedures, provide easier access to credit, and help exporters to overcome non-tariff barriers in global markets. This is a major boost for MSMEs, which form the backbone of India's export industry. Second one, simplification of customs procedures. The budget has announced simplification in customs clearance to reduce compliance burdens. This will enhance the ease of doing business for both exporters and importers, making cross-border trade smoother and more efficient. Boosting manufacturing and infrastructure, the continued production-linked incentive scheme for key sectors will attract investments and integrate the Indian industries into global supply chains. Increased investments in railways, roads, and renewable energy will improve connectivity and support industrial growth. A strong focus has been placed on vocational training and skill development, ensuring that India's workforce is equipped with industry-relevant skills. This will improve employment opportunities and enhance the productivity of export-oriented sectors. Same ways to support for MSMEs, improved access to finance and technology upgrades will foster entrepreneurship, especially in rural and semi-urban areas. Increased budget allocation for MSME promotion schemes will help small businesses scale up operations and expand into global markets. Focus product schemes for footwear and leather industry. The budget has announced a special focus on these 2 sectors, which will help improve design capacity, promote component manufacturing, and upgrade machineries. This move will enhance the quality and global competitiveness of both leather and non-leather footwear exports. India's toy industry to go global. A dedicated scheme for India's toy industry will focus on developing clusters, skills, and manufacturing ecosystems. The goal is to position India as a global hub for toy production, strengthening the Made in India brand. Introduction of Bharat TradeNet. The government has announced Bharat TradeNet, a unified digital platform for export documentation. This will reduce administrative burdens, increase efficiency, promote transparency in trade operations. The initiatives will make exports faster and more cost-effective, benefiting all stakeholders in foreign trade. Shipbuilding clusters for export growth. The new shipbuilding clusters will be developed with additional infrastructure skilling and technology support. This will enhance India's maritime capabilities, reduce dependency on foreign shipping lines, and save forex outflows. Export promotion schemes and interest subventions. The Commerce Ministry has allocated 2,250 crore of export promotion schemes like interest equalization scheme and market access initiatives. We expect the IES scheme to be extended from January 2025 with a cap of 10 crore as suggested by FIEO. Proposal from export promotion councils for international events in 2025 and 26 are yet to be approved, but we expect quick action on this format too. The Union Budget 2025 has laid out a clear roadmap for strengthening India's export sector, boosting MSME growth, and enhancing global competitiveness. While we have discussed some key highlights, I'm sure there is much more to explore and understand in the detail. We are fortunate to have two experts with us today who will give deeper information into the budget's impacts. And I thank FIEO and the World Trade Center and the Khaitan and Co for organizing and helping the MSMEs to understand the budget much better way. And thank you very much. And I thank the experts who accepted the invitation and participating in this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, for sharing your insights about the budget. With that, we now move on to Mr. Homi P. Ranina. I invite him for his address. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. I'm grateful to Mr. Gopalakrishnan of FIEO, Mr. Vivek George, Khaitan and Company for having been part of this webinar. It gives me great pleasure to speak to you on the 12th budget proposals of the present government. One has to only look at the progress that India has made in the last 12 years. And I can only say with a certain amount of pride that what we have achieved in the last 12 years is more than what we achieved in the first 40 years after India's independence. And that perspective must not be lost sight of, because India is today looked upon as one of the great powers of the world. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, if you traveled outside India, you were not as much respected and recognized as you are today. And that is because people respect power, people respect economic growth, and people respect the contribution which India is now making to the global economy. This is an important point which I would like to bear in mind, because the budget is only an exercise in what I call arithmetic for the government of India. But the importance of the budget is that certain announcements are made which spell out government policy over the next 1 year. It is like the State of the Union message which the President of the United States gives every year. In India, the Prime Minister does not do that, but the Finance Minister gives the total breakout of all the policies which the government is going to have in the next few months of the current financial year, which is about to start from April 2025. Now, let me give you a brief background. The Indian economy was projected to have increased to grow by about 6.7%. But in the last few months, there has been a slowdown of the Indian economy. There has been fall in consumption. People are not spending enough money. There's been a fall in investment because while the government has put in more than 11 lakh crores in infrastructure projects, unfortunately, the private sector has been lagging behind. The private sector has to now stand up, rise to the occasion, and invest money which is necessary for their own prosperity and for the growth of the country. So if you look at the underlying trend of this budget, it is to promote consumption, because consumption will then encourage private players to invest more money in their manufacturing activities, And that in turn will lead to greater employment. And that in turn will have, again, a multiplier effect on growth and on prosperity. So please understand one thing, if you were to ask an economist, what is consumption-related growth? The main advantage of a consumption-related growth is that it has a multiplier effect. That more growth in the consumption means more investments, more production, more employment, and in turn, more employment means, again, more purchasing power in the hands of the people. And this is where I think the growth will come from. So it is this multiplier effect as a result of consumption which will propel the Indian economy to a higher growth rate, which is projected at 6.7%, but could be even touching 7% if things go well, as expected. Now, one of the important factors which in India has to be considered is the vast section of the people who are in the rural economy, the agricultural sector. So people ask me very often, why is the government putting so much emphasis on agriculture? The answer is obvious. First, because you have to help the people who are on the bottom of the pyramid. Number two, you have to propel people who are aspirational in their nature. And that is where the growth is going to come from. If you ask any multinational company in India, they will tell you that our entire marketing focus is on the rural sector, on the agricultural sector, because that is the one sector which can enable them to record a 12 to 15% rate of growth and achieve more profits. Therefore, the agricultural sector has been given the right emphasis, not only in this budget, but in the past 11 budgets which were presented. Now, if you look at agriculture, the main purpose is the same, exactly the same. Promote, give more purchasing power to the agriculturists. Because if you put more money in the pockets of farmers and agriculturists, you will be able to boost consumption. And they have a pent-up demand. They may be living in the remotest villages of India, but they still watch television every day. And they see the advertisements. And they have that pent-up demand. All that is necessary is that they must have more money in their pockets. Therefore, the government says, we are going to now concentrate in ensuring that more and more farmers and agriculturists are able to earn more money. So three things are being proposed. One, to ensure that they go in for high value crops like oilseeds, pulses, etc., which give them a good profit. Now, as you know, India is importing a substantial amount of oil, edible oil, from countries like Malaysia and other countries. Now, why should we do that? Why can't we produce enough edible oil to meet our requirements? Therefore, the government is saying, we will now have certain special programs and encourage farmers to go in for oilseeds production and pulses production. Pulses like urad dal and others, which are in great demand in India, the production has to go up. And once the production goes up, the farmer stands to gain because he's going to have a higher margin of profit than from the sale of rice, wheat, and other agricultural crops. Therefore, oilseeds production, pulses production is going to be encouraged under a special mission which the government is going to set up. Second important point, that the government wants to give them more credit because farmers need money and they have been in the past going to money lenders who have been charging them usurious rates of interest. So more and more money is going to be pumped into the agricultural sector by terms of credit. And thirdly, marketing of their produce, harvesting and marketing. Today, the middleman eats up most of the profits which you make when the food is sold in the market. The farmer doesn't get even 30% of the value of the final product which is sold in the market in the cities of India. So remove the middleman and ensure that there is enough infrastructure built up to enable the farmer to move this produce from the farm to the final consumer in the shortest possible time. These are the three areas of growth for the agricultural sector. Irrigation, of course, has always been a great priority in the past, and this also has been given enough emphasis in this year's budget. So I expect that next year, the agricultural sector will do phenomenally well. We have had two good monsoons in the past 2 years, and I'm sure, and if the next monsoon is equally good, there's going to be tremendous amount of purchasing power created in the hands of the middle class families, not only in the urban areas, but in the rural areas. Now, you'll be surprised to know that in the rural areas, things have improved tremendously. There's a tremendous amount of infrastructure which has been coming up. Houses have been built, schools have been built, healthcare centers have been constructed, and a lot of money is done. A lot of money has been invested in certain schemes. Manrega scheme was one of the initial schemes. Several other schemes are now being propelled so that people are assured, agriculture is assured of a suitable amount of investment, and therefore they will reap the fruits of that investment itself. So increasing production, agricultural production. Now FIEO is in charge of exports. Let me just make one comment on exports. The export of traditional items like leather goods, footwear, the other cotton textiles, all that is going in its own, is taking its own pace. But what we are not considering is the phenomenal opportunity for export of agricultural produce. Today, India is, in last year, 120 crores of agricultural produce were exported. But in my opinion, there is a much greater need, a much greater potential. To give you an illustration, a small country like New Zealand will export the kiwis all over the world and earn something like 12 to 15 billion US dollars. Or a small country like Netherlands will export the tulips, the flower, and earn another 10, 12 billion dollars. So if that is the potential of small countries like New Zealand and Netherlands, just imagine what potential India has. Today, we are one of the largest producers of fruits, vegetables, and flowers in the world. But we are not able to take advantage of the global market. Now, globally, everybody needs food. And you see the price of food all over the world. In America, in Europe, in England, it's shooting up. England is struggling to get even basic vegetables like carrots or tomatoes, because in Europe they are having a drought and they are not able to go get enough produce, especially after Brexit. As a result, today there's a tremendous demand for agricultural produce to be exported to all countries of the world, as far as Latin America, because that is where the demands are. And I want the agriculturists to benefit from this. And it is actually happening. To give you an illustration, agriculturists in Hyderabad and Nasik who grow special grapes, seedless grapes, are now billionaires, simply because their grapes are now being exported and are being used all over Europe for making wine. There's a tremendous fall in grape production in Spain, Portugal, and Italy because of a drought which they had for the last 3 years. So Indian grapes are today being exported and being used for making of wine. Now, this is where the prospects are. Just imagine how much more money India farmers can make if we can be export-oriented as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. So not only are we going to make huge progress in export of traditional items, but also of other items. And to give you one more illustration, in the manufacturing sector, today India has emerged as the greatest exporter of electronic items like mobile phones. India has become the hub for the manufacture of mobile phones, and today are mobile phones manufactured in India by even companies like Apple and others are being sold all over the world. Now, this is the strength of the Indian economy. This is how we will fill the supply chain of the global supply chain, and we will be able to bring down the global prices of essential commodities. China, as you know, is having its own problems. There are geopolitical tensions between various big powers. As a result of that, India is going to become the greatest beneficiary. Let's not forget that. And this is a very important point where organizations like FIEO and others have to take full advantage. Exporters have to go all out to meet the global demand, because really now it's the world is at our feet. We have the ability to do it. People are now accepting the quality of Indian products. Indian products are now coming to international standards. Electronic items are being exported. Even things like automobiles. Today, India is becoming the hub for manufacture of automobiles. All the major automobile players in the world are now setting up bases in India to manufacture automobiles and components. And this is where the real prospects are lying. Another area which is now opening up to the private sector, to private exporters, is in the defense industry. Indian government has now allowed private sector to enter the defense industry, to go in for manufacture. Millions of components, electronic items are going to be manufactured in India by smaller companies. So when we talk of medium scale and small enterprises, I'm sure that many of these small and medium enterprises are going to grow into large units. Large units are going to be the main benefit of this, because they will be able to now achieve the economies of scale. And once they have the economies of scale, the prices will come down and we will produce best quality products at competitive prices, which will be acceptable to the rest of the world. Another area, of course, is in semiconductors. India is emerging as one of the few countries in the world where semiconductors will be manufactured. Today, as you know, Taiwan is the major supplier of semiconductor chips. Singapore is a major supplier of semiconductor wafers. India is going to set up now both these plants and emerge as the third largest producer of semiconductor chips and wafers, which are so essential for the electronic industry. Without semiconductor chips and wafers, nothing will work in the electronic sector. And if India can therefore fulfill its own internal needs and be a net exporter of these items, again, the prospects are tremendous. So I see this budget as not only just consumption oriented, but a budget which will push India into the League of Nations, which will make India acceptable to the rest of the world, and we will fit into the global supply chain, which today is at great risk. This is where I think the real advantage of this government lies, and the budget has given the right focus, the right emphasis, and the right trend towards a certain goal. Coming now to some of the issues involved. Just let me first give you a few figures. Budget is nothing but income and expenditure of the government of India. How does the government finance its programs of development? How does the government put money in infrastructure development? Infrastructure development, as you know, has been lagging behind. But after the last 10 years, we have made tremendous scope and improvement in infrastructure development, be it roads, expressways, highways, rail, airports, seaports, you name it. Power, energy, we are now emerging and setting up a world-class infrastructure, which I think will happen in the next 5 years. So by 2030, I expect India will have a world-class infrastructure in place comparable to China, America, or any other country of the world. And once that happens, then our growth path will go into double digits. From 6.97% to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10%. All these years, if we could not grow faster, it was only because of the unavailability of good infrastructure. But now that this is being put in place, it will have such a catalytic effect that the Indian economy will grow definitely at a rate of 10%. Now, one of the things, as I mentioned to you earlier, was there was a slowdown in consumption pattern in the last few months. I think the government has taken full cognizance of this and realized that if you want India to grow, then there has to be a push for consumption. So the government has now come up with a proposal which I think surprised everybody. I don't think anybody who heard a budget speech on Saturday were even remotely expecting that the government would not just tinker with the tax laws as the governments in the past have been doing, but actually make the tax laws more vibrant and make the tax laws more responsive to the needs of the Indian economy. So just coming to the specific things, the issue of increasing the exemption limit to 12 lakh rupees. Now 12 lakh rupees for employees may become 12 lakh 75,000 rupees, but it may be even more. For example, if you put money in the national pension system, you can get additional benefit under Section 80 CCD, and that would give you a much higher amount of complete exemption. So somebody can easily earn up to 13.5 lakhs, not just 12 lakhs, but up to 13.5 lakhs. If he's an employee, standard deduction 75,000, balance amount given, because you can get up to 14% of your salary as a deduction under Section 80 CCD. And therefore, somebody earning up to 13.5 lakhs can get complete exemption. Now, let me just give one other angle to this, which somehow I've not been able to find in any newspaper, any comment. 13.5 lakhs per individual, please note. So if there's a husband and wife, both earning, both professionals, both can earn an income of 13.5 lakhs. So your family income up to 27 lakh rupees, 2.7 million rupees will be exempt from tax. And if you have family members, maybe your father, your mother, their income may not be as much as that. But if somebody has surplus funds, which he invests in his own name, he can easily gift those funds to his own father and mother and allow the father and mother to earn income and go up to that limit, whatever limit is possible, up to the figure of 12 lakh rupees, which is exempt. Of course, they will not get standard deduction. They will not get the pension funds benefit because they are already senior citizens. But even 12 lakh rupees for each of them. So you can have a family of 4, husband, wife, father, mother. Husband, wife can get a tax-free income if they are employed of 13.5 lakhs. Father and mother, old father and mother who may be retired, but for whom you can create income by giving them gifts and creating income in their hands. And they can have another 12 lakhs, each one of them. So another 24 lakhs. So just imagine what potential this particular provision has. For each individual, it is not for a family, for each individual. So a family of 4, husband, wife, parents who are retired, you can generate income in their hands. For example, to give you one more illustration, let us assume your father or mother has a house with whom you are staying, or they may be staying separately. They can lease that house to you, and you can pay them a rent. And if you pay them a rent, then you're creating income in their hands. Today, for example, the house is there, but they're getting no income. It's self-occupied. But if they create a tenancy in your favor, and you pay lease rent to them and create income in their hands, then they will also have tax-free income up to that figure of 12 lakhs. So there are so many possibilities of tax planning within the family. And as you know, gifts between family members is not liable to gift tax. It's only when you make a gift to a non-relative of more than 50,000 that it becomes taxable as income under Section 56 of the Income Tax Act. But otherwise, if between family members, gifts can easily be made. And if the gifts are made and you create income in the hands of people who have less income than 12 lakhs, like your own father, your mother, then you will be able to generate a huge amount of tax-free income. So a family can earn almost up to 30, 40 lakhs of tax-free income every year. This is the potential of this particular provision. I'm sure chartered accountants are going to be very happy with this because they'll be able to do a lot of tax planning for family members and generate much more of tax-free income for the whole family. So this is the potential. Now, what will be the impact of that? Consumption, savings. So when people say you're promoting consumption at the expense of investments and savings, the answer is no. You have the option now to invest the way you like. And I personally feel that the amount of investment in SIPs, systematic investment plans, will shoot up in the coming months. Because more money in the hands of people, they want to save more money, they want to earn more interest in the future. And I think that SIPs are going to be one of the great tools by which a lot of money will go into the capital market and the stock market in course of time. So the stock market has not reacted very favorably to this year's budget, as it has been flat. But I think as things move, as people get more money in their hands and as the amount is invested more in SIPs rather than in buying goods and services, the capital market is going to improve drastically. Now, people say government has announced that, finance minister says that she has foregone revenue of 1 lakh crores by increasing this exemption limit to 12 lakhs. But I think there is something in it. I don't think they will lose. Maybe on the revenue, on the direct tax front, there may be a fall in revenues. Though if I give you the figure, they have projected 14 lakhs 38,000 crores as revenue from individual income tax for the financial year 25-26. I again repeat, 14 lakhs 38,000 crores. The second major gainer is corporate tax, where they have budgeted 10 lakhs 82,000 crores. And goods and services tax, they have budgeted at 11 lakhs 78,000 crores as the revenue for 25-26, the projected revenue. But if people start consuming more goods, don't forget the GST collection will go up. If the GST collection goes up because more and more people are buying goods and services as it is expected, then while there may be a certain hit on the direct tax front by sacrificing 1 lakh crores, that may be more than made up by the increase in GST collection as people spend more money. So spending more money will give a boost to the GST collection, and therefore whatever shortfall they suffer as a result of the income tax, direct tax collection going down will be made up by the increase in the GST collection. And therefore, all in all, I don't think the government is going to suffer in revenue terms. But apart from that, there are other side effects. As I said, more consumption means private sector will now be enthused to invest more money in their enterprises. Therefore, more money will go into the purchase of plant and machineries. That itself will lead to greater revenue growth. More labor will be employed. That itself will lead to greater growth because more employees means more tax collection from large number of people who are employed. And for the multiplier effect is unbelievable. It is very difficult to actually crystallize and find out what the real figure is, but it's going to be substantial. In fact, people like the great old economists like Lord Milton Keynes and others, they had suggested, you want to revive the economy, you want to increase the rate of growth, just go on investing. and let people spend more money on consumption. So consumption is good for the Indian economy. At the same time, I would like to caution people that while consumption is good from the Indian economy point of view, from your point of view, a certain balance has to be maintained. And that balance is in terms of savings. So while you will now get more money into your hands, I would expect you to take a matured view and invest some part of the money in items where you will be able to provide for your future growth. Now, as you know, India has more than 30% of the population is below the age of 25. A lot of young people are involved. I would like to tell the younger generation, give my message to the younger generation. Try and save more money as you can. So if you have got more disposable income, please save as much as you can. And there are 3 reasons which I would like to give you why you should save more. One is there is less and less of job security today. We are not living in a place where a person would have a job for the rest of his life. Those days are gone. Job security is not possible. Second reason, interest rates are going to come down. We have currently fairly good interest rates. But if you look at the economies of the world, like Japan, Europe, USA, UK, interest rates are 1.5%, 2% on savings. So interest rates will come down. And third reason why I would like you to save more money is because of medical research and the advent of genomics. More and more illnesses are going to be cured. And more people are going to live longer and longer and longer. Lifespans will increase substantially in the coming years. Many children born today, millions of children born today will live to see 100 years. It is not something impossible. So you have 3 issues before you: lack of job security, low interest rate regime, and a long life. And therefore, I would request all young people to save as much as they can while they can go in for consumption, but they should not splurge, but save as much as they can so that they get a better life and a much healthier life in the future. Coming now to the other aspects. The government has given a push for innovation. Now, this is where the future lies. Everything is changing. The whole world is changing. We are talking of artificial intelligence, generative AI, all kinds of changes, machine learning, 3D printing, quantum computing. Everything is now changing. STEM subjects are the only subjects which the students will now prosper in. So if you are going to spend money on innovation, as the government wants to do, they have an innovation mission. They have set up, huge amounts of money are being invested in those ventures. New IITs are coming up. More and more students are getting into the techno sector. Labor, the employment scene is changing. We have a peculiar situation where there are a lot of educated people who may be looking for jobs, but there are a lot of companies who are looking for people with the right skills. So we have this mismatch between job opportunities and those who have the skills. And this is where I think the younger generation must now take advantage of what the government is offering you, giving you educational facilities, more money is invested in education. This will ensure that the younger people have the talent pool. You build up a talent pool. And let me give you one illustration of how this talent pool is now being looked at by the rest of the world. Every single multinational company in India in the world is setting up a GCC in India, Global Capability Centers. GCCs have now become the in thing. I have not come across a single multinational who has not come to India. And why have they come to India? Because of the pool of talented people that India offers them at competitive prices. All medical research scientific research is being done in India. So this is where we have BPOs, KPOs, we have GCCs, all these things are coming up in such a huge way. And that is where prospects for employment rise. So younger people have to understand, the young students, that they have to now skill themselves, upskill themselves, and go in for new ventures where their skills can be utilized. And that is where there is tremendous scope. Salaries are huge. Today, there are those who are employed in GCCs, in technical centers, GTCs, etc., are paying large amounts because there's a shortage of manpower. Another area where there's a shortage of manpower is in the healthcare industry. India, therefore, in this year's budget, they have given the emphasis on what they call medical tourism. More and more hospitals are being set up in India, because while you may have things like free medical treatment in foreign countries like the United States, UK, elsewhere, but their national health service is in the doldrums. People have to wait for months together to get proper medical treatment in those countries. And this is where India is emerging as an alternate. People are flying down to India. They find it cheaper to fly down to India to take medical treatment than to take in their own country, because the medical treatment in India which they get is of world-class standards and at a very, very competitive price. So medical tourism is now one aspect which has also been given tremendous emphasis by the Indian government. Tourism sector, of course, as a whole, generally, is again a very big area which has prospects. Again, in this year's budget, a lot of emphasis has been given on building up tourism. More and more hotels, more and more hospitalities. This also gives a lot of opportunity for people who are not so well skilled in technical subjects. Many people can't be skilled in technical subjects, but they can be certainly employed in the hospitality sector. They will be more service oriented. And if they're more service oriented, then hospitality sector gives immense growth for employment opportunities. Retail is another area where there's tremendous scope for employment opportunities for people who are not very well skilled. Because we have to understand one thing, that everybody can't be skilled. You need a certain mental framework to have this engineering skill or a technical skill. That different people have different skills, different strengths, and we have to work on the strengths of different people. So the hospitality sector, the retail sector, all this is being in emphasis so that more and more employment can be created for people who are not well skilled or cannot take up very skilled jobs. In fact, unskilled jobs today are in great demand. Today we need an army of carpenters, plumbers, electricians, automobile workers, etc. Very often you go to the construction industry, you speak to a real estate developer, and his grievances, I'm not getting enough people to complete the project in the stipulated period of time. So we have a very unfortunate thing that while there are a lot of people who are unemployed, at the same time the industry is starved of the right amount of labor. And that is where the government should now concentrate on, and government is doing that. Apart from IITs, they're also setting up Indian technical institutes, and not just the big IITs as you have, but Indian technical institutes. About 500 Indian technical institutes have been set up, which will train carpenters, laborers, masons, the tile layers, painters, electricians, so that the real estate industry gets enough labor to complete the projects. And this is where, again, the tremendous growth is experienced. Real estate is one major industry which is employment oriented, like the tourism industry. Real estate development also means a lot of people get jobs. There are millions of people who need to be employed. There are millions of people who need houses. Don't forget that out of a population of 1.4 billion people, 50 to 60 million people get married every year. because they're in the age group of, say, 20 to 25. And they need homes, they need furniture, they need electrical appliances, they need the other things to live on, apart from scooters and small cars. So during the wedding season, there's a tremendous boost to all these items where the demand goes up and housing goes up, purchase of cars, scooters, white goods go up. This is something which India has that great advantage of. And this is why the growth, why the whole world is looking at India, because they realize that with the type of population that we have, India has to grow. There's no way by which India cannot grow, simply because of the demography of India. So apart from the fact that we are the world's greatest democracy, our large demography is one thing which the whole world is looking at. And let me give you one more illustration. We talk about the middle class. This government has tried to help the middle class. Why the middle class? Because the middle class in India today comprises of 150 million Indians. And 150 million Indians is the population of England and France put together. This is the strength of the Indian middle class. And this middle class is growing and growing and growing every year. That is where the consumption will take place. That is how industry is going to get a tremendous boost. There's no way by which India can go down, simply because of the demography of India and the fact that we have a younger population than any other country of the world. Even China is facing a problem today. They are having more old people than young people because of their certain policy which they had followed a few years ago. But India is different. In India, it's just growing and growing and growing. And another reason why government in this year's budget has put one big emphasis on one sector, toy industry. The toy industry, if you look at the budget speech of the finance minister, she talks about the toy industry. Huge market. Huge market because of the young population. And the toy industry has great export potential. Toy industry has been growing because if we are now been able to have the right quality product, there was a time when China had the monopoly in toys, but today that monopoly has been broken. Indian toy industry has come of age, and there's a tremendous prospect for the toy industry. So the budget speech refers to the toy industry as a special case because it has not only labor generation, but it has tremendous export potential, and a lot of consumption will happen for the toy industry. So these are some of the important aspects, because very often we ask, why is the government so keen on certain things? But there is a method in their madness, so to speak. They want to give, because these industries, though they may look very ordinary like the toy industry, but they have a tremendous potential for growth. So agriculture is one which has tremendous potential for growth. Small scale sector has tremendous potential for growth. And another aspect, empowerment of women. Empowerment of women is very important in a country like India, because traditionally women have played a subsidiary role in the family businesses. But now women are coming forward. Women are being trained. Women are being given loans. Women are given the technology. Today, there are women in rural areas who know how to operate a robot. They know how to operate drones. Drones are being used in the rural agricultural sector to sow seeds, pesticides, fertilizers. And the women are operating those drones. So seek of women power. Women power, again, is something which we cannot underestimate in India. Tremendous scope for growth. And that is where the consumption patterns will go up. This is why companies like HUL and others are today concentrating on the rural sector. Why? Because the women are there. The women need things which they so far not been aware of, or did not have the money to buy. Now they all want it. They want to have all the things that people in the urban areas have been getting, which will now come to the rural sector. And that is why I'm very, very confident that the government has given the right impetus for certain sectors. And while we may look it from our own personal point of view, like for example, people say capital market has not got any benefit. But what they don't realize is that the capital market will get the benefit when the industry grows, when more profitability comes, when more people put money through SIPs in the capital market. That is how the capital market is going to grow. So while there is no specific incentive given in this year's budget for the capital market, for capital gains or any other avenue, there has been underlying growth potential for the capital market. And I expect the capital market to improve in the coming years. Of course, there are some global factors. Foreign institutional investors have their own agenda. They will pull out money if the interest rates in the United States go up. They will put in money if the interest rates in the United States goes down. So it all depends on them. But today what we need is a strong retail investor group in India, so that even if the FPIs and the FIIs move out of this country, the Indian capital market can still continue to grow. And that is why we find that whenever there is a fall, there again it's only temporary, because the people will continue to buy stocks which have a very good potential. So the capital market, in my opinion, is going to do well in the coming months. The next season will start, earning season will be starting in June or July. Agricultural season will begin. I have a feeling that the Nifty and the Sensex will go up to much higher levels, though it should be done in a very calibrated manner, because too high jumps is also not good. When the capital market shoots up, people are happy. When it falls, they are unhappy, but that is not how it should be. There must be a reasonable rate of growth in the capital market, in the stock market, and investors must stand to gain and get a certain amount of profit. So if you look at the whole budgetary provisions and the agenda of the government, it is growth, investment-oriented growth, consumption-oriented growth. These are the two engines on which the Indian economy is going to take off: consumption growth, investment growth, and stability. Stability is very important. I must say, to the credit of the finance minister, that in spite of all these concessions, she has kept the fiscal deficit in check at 4.4% of the GDP for 25-26. Current year will be 4.8. But 4.4% of GDP is a very important aspect. No country in the world has been having such fiscal consolidation as India is able to achieve. Public debt is now going to be reduced. That's another good emerging trend from this year's budget, so that the interest burden comes down. Interest burden is borne by the future generations. We want interest to come down, government to borrow less, more money should come from the people. And this is why I think this budget has achieved a certain degree. They've sowed the seeds. Sowing the seeds of growth is important. Growth doesn't happen immediately. It takes time. We are talking about a 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon. Today, our Indian GDP is roughly 3.6 trillion US dollars. By 2030, it is expected to touch 5 trillion US dollars. And by 2047, when we celebrate 100 years of our independence, it will certainly touch 15 trillion US dollars. So this is an economy which will always grow. There can be no looking back. Because of our demography, because of our technical strengths, because of all the agricultural benefits that we have. Don't forget, India has the largest amount of arable land in the world. We may be smaller than Canada or China, but the arable land available in India is the largest in the world. So agricultural production will always increase if we go in for good methods of cultivation. And with that, the people will stand to gain, agricultures will stand to gain, consumption patterns will increase. They don't need income tax exemption. All that they need is more purchasing power in their hands. And this is what this budget is going to do. Put more purchasing power in the hands of people, whether they're middle class urbaners or whether they are the rural sector. Because the Indian economy is slated for a 7 to 8% rate of growth. By 2030, we'll achieve a 10% rate of growth when world-class infrastructure is put in place. 10% is not unreasonable. I'm not trying to be over-optimistic. I'm being very realistic. By 2030, we'll have a 10% rate of growth. And when that happens, take it from me, ladies and gentlemen, that we will be the super economic power of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ranina. In fact, it is always a pleasure to listen to you and try, interpreting your thoughts with clarity on the budget proposals. It's a very well-rounded analysis of, the budget and how it navigates the nuances of public policy and what we can expect. I really like your idea of, compounding the income within the family. That is quite a creative one. I hope, it materializes. And your thoughts, your advices to the youngsters to save more because of the different reasons that you have cited. So anyway, I'll take a pause and I'll now hand it over to our team from Khaitan and Co. Brijesh and Chitrarth are already there. Over to you, Brijesh.
Thank you, Vivek. Very good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen.
Brijesh, sorry, can you go on to the presentation more?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we had heard Mr. Ranina giving insights into the macroeconomics of the budget. We'll now come into the indirect tax proposals covering GST as well as customs related amendments. So our presentation is divided into two parts, covering goods and services related amendments and the proposals that are brought out from customs law perspective. To start with, we'll cover GST related amendments, covering certain specific and key legislative changes that the government has brought in. So that will be covering amendment to section 17(5)(d), insertion of definition of local authority, time of supply relating to vouchers. When it comes to credit note, the mandate for reduction in the output tax liability basis the reversal of credit by the customers. The proposal to introduce track and trace mechanism for certain evasion prone commodities. Also about the proposed amendment for making pre-deposit for filing an appeal where there is a demand for payment of penalty. Also some changes relating to input service distributor mechanism. And we'll end the discussions on GST by covering the transactions where goods are sold from SEZ or FTWZ. On the customs leg, my colleague Chitrath will be covering certain changes relating to provisional assessment. Also, the new provision relating to voluntary revision of goods imported or exported post its clearance. Also, the proposal under customs as well as central excise law relating to abolition of settlement commission. And from the regulatory aspect on the relaxations under the IGCRS rules. And lastly, we'll also be covering certain changes in the rate of duty for goods to be imported from 2nd of February 2025. Start with, we'll specifically cover the legislative changes under CGST Act, Section 17(5)(d). It basically restricts input tax credit in respect of certain input or input services that go into for construction of land and say immovable property. So when say a developer or a real estate company purchases certain inputs or input services for construction, they are restricted from availing input tax credit. So this restriction was challenged before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in Safari Retreats in October 2024 had laid down some guidelines particularly in context of the restriction. So they had upheld the restriction under 17(5)(d) of the Act to say that the law can restrict input tax credit. They also interpreted what is prescribed in the 17(5)(d) in context of the plant and machinery. The phrase used was plant or machinery. In before the Supreme Court, the department had argued that plant or machinery had to be read as plant and machinery, which was defined under the explanation to section 17. Also, the court clarified that when the phrase used in the CGST Act is in context of use of such input services on his own account, it has to be read in conjunction with what is the intent. If the intent is to further lease it or license it to some other person, then it cannot be treated as use of the input services on the own account, and therefore in such cases the credit should be allowed. So the judgment was a welcome move, and industry was very happy about such amendment. The amendment was favoring the industry, and accordingly the assessees, particularly real estate companies, started taking away ITC. But then in the recent budget, the government has come out with a clarification, or rather a retrospective amendment to say that the phrase used in 17(5)(d), that is plant or machinery, is amended retrospectively from July 2017 to give the meaning as plant or machinery, which is already defined in the CGST Act. So this, in a way, is trying to curtail the benefit which is given by the Supreme Court. But in our view, though this restriction is in context of plant and machinery is defined, and it is basically giving an exception as to what credit is admissible. But the benefit that is given by the court in context of use of such input services on the own account, that is still available to the assessees. And therefore, if certain, say, real estate companies or developers are procuring certain input services and they intend to construct a building and then lease it or license it to, say, some other person who's availing the services of the real estate developer, then the real estate company can avail input tax credit and use it for discharging the output tax liability, which they earn as, say, rental income or lease income. And therefore, though not everything is restricted as ITC in terms of the restriction that is curtailed in the amendment, but the companies can still have a look at the overall arrangement that they have, whether their outward supply is taxable or they're not discharging tax on their outward, like be it by way of sale of immovable property, and therefore it is outside the ambit of GST. And therefore, the companies, particularly real estate developers, can look at an option of strategizing their transactions in such a way that they are able to avail the input tax credit in respect of certain input services that go for construction of the immovable property. The next amendment is under Section 2, subsection 69 of the CGST Act. This is particularly in context of the services that are provided by, say, certain companies to the local authorities. So the term local authority has been defined in the CGST Act, but local authority definition in turn refers to certain authorities which use local fund or municipal fund. So there was always an ambiguity as to what is the definition or scope of local fund and municipal fund. And therefore, there have been some litigations as to whether the supplies that are made to the local authorities are exempt or not. So now with this amendment where the law proposes to define local fund and municipal fund, the ongoing disputes are expected to end. Next, we'll cover concept of what is voucher and how the tax position has been. So as far as vouchers are concerned, under CGST Act, there has always been a dispute as to whether sale of vouchers qualifies to be supply of goods, whether it qualifies to be supply of service, or whether it qualifies to be taxable as supply of goods or services at all or not. So under CGST Act, the law has provided the time of supply of vouchers, both under the category of supply of goods as well as under the category of supply of services. So recently in Karnataka High Court, in the matter of premier sales promotion, the Karnataka High Court had ruled that sale of vouchers are nothing but an instrument for payment, and it is akin to money, and therefore it doesn't qualify to be goods. Therefore, the same is not taxable. So the GST Council has deliberated on this, and they have recommended that sale of vouchers should not be treated as supply of goods nor as supply of services. Therefore, the same should not be taxed under GST. Subsequently, after the GST Council meeting, they came out with a clarification by way of circular uh, that was in October 2024 to clarify that sale of vouchers are nothing but actionable claims, and therefore they're not liable to tax. Actionable claims are covered under Schedule 3 of the CGST Act, which are in turn transactions which are neither qualifying as supply of goods nor supply of services, and therefore the same are not taxable. So pursuant to this decision and the clarification issued by the government, the specific provision relating to time of supply of vouchers were redundant. And therefore, by this budget, the government has excluded certain specific provisions relating to time of supply of vouchers because they were not required when the sale of vouchers itself is not taxable. So to give effect to the recommendation of the GST Council, these amendments are proposed. The next amendment is to Section 34(2) of the CGST Act. 34 deals with issuance of credit notes. Credit notes is issued generally when a supplier sells certain goods or services and intends to pass on the discount to its customers. Say goods were sold at rupees 100 and subsequently to give a discount of say rupees 10, the seller issues credit note to the buyer, which in turn requires the buyer to reverse the input tax credit attributable to such discount or the reduction in the amount of sale. So the provision, particularly Section 15(3)(b), specifically required that the credit note value or the discount amount can be reduced from the value of output supply, and the seller can reduce his output tax liability subject to the condition that the recipient, that is the customer, reverses the input tax credit attributable to such discounts. So to give similar meaning to the requirement of reversal of credit was not flowing in the provisions relating to credit note, that is in Section 34. So with this amendment, the government has proposed that Section 34(2), the proviso to Section 34(2) has to be amended to ensure that the recipient, particularly when the customer has availed ITC, he is required to reverse such ITC. And when the goods are sold to a customer who is not a registered person, that is B2C supplies, the incidence of the tax on that discount amount should not be passed on to the customer. That is, the incidence has to be borne by the supplier. Only in such cases, the supplier, that is the seller, can reduce his output tax liability. So this is a condition that is now brought in or imbibed into Section 34 itself. And prior to this amendment, there was a circular that was issued in Circular 212, wherein they had clarified that since the reverse the input tax credit is on the seller, so to ensure that such conditions are met, the seller has to issue a certificate to establish that the customer has reversed the input tax credit, and if the amount of ITC involved is more than 5 lakhs, then such seller has to produce a certificate from a CA or a CMA to establish the bona fides and to show that the customer has actually reversed input tax credit, so that the benefit of reduced output tax liability can be availed or enjoyed by the supplier. So with this intent, the government proposes to streamline this arrangement of discount being routed through credit notes and ensures that the customer avails the benefit of reduction in the output tax liability. The next proposal is by way of introduction of a new unique mechanism. It is called track and trace mechanism. So this is by way of insertion of a new provision, that is Section 148A is proposed to be introduced in the CGST Act. The idea is certain, say, evasion-prone commodities, for example, tobacco products, or even alcoholic liquor for human consumption, these products where there is high evasion that the government foresees, these products will be affixed with unique identification mark, so that throughout the supply chain, the government can keep track and whether at every stage of supply chain, whether the taxes have been paid appropriately or not. So similar mechanisms are sold. Alcoholic liquor for human consumption is sold, which comes under the state excise law. So similarly, the government is proposing to identify certain persons who are required to comply with this unique identification mark fixation on their products, and failure of complying with certain mechanism for the goods that are to be notified will lead to penal consequences. The penalty that is proposed is an amount of rupees 1 lakh or 10% of the tax that is payable by the seller for non-compliance, higher of the two amounts. So this is something that is proposed to be implemented in future, which will be notified at a later date. The next amendment is relating to filing of appeals. So section 107(6) and 112(8) of the CGST Act are proposed to be amended to that effect. So for filing an appeal, generally the requirement is the supplier is required to, or the taxpayer is required to pay a deposit a certain percentage of the amount in dispute. If, for example, presently, as the law stands unamended, whenever there is a dispute and say there is a demand by the tax authorities and that is confirmed, and say that is for rupees 100, then the requirement is 10% of that amount, that is 10 rupees of the amount in dispute, has to be deposited with the government, so that the assessee can go on appeal before the appellate authority. So presently, section 107(6) as well as 112(8) prescribes 25% of the amount in dispute when it comes to a case where only penalty is disputed. Whenever it comes to penalty, the deposit presently is 25%, and in January 2024, this was amended to reduce the penalty from 25% to 10%, and to ensure that 10% is implemented across the board, even in cases where there is a demand only of penalty, the government proposes to amend the proviso under these sections to ensure that the deposit or the pre-deposit amount is only 10% of the amount in dispute. Even in cases with where there is only penalty amount, the deposit amount, pre-deposit amount will be reduced or limited to 10%. So that is based on the present proposal for amendment to section 107 and 112. The next important legislative change that we are looking at is implementation of input service distributor mechanism. So in the budget of 2024, there was an amendment made to the provisions relating to input service distributor. And it was also proposed that from 1st April 2025, ISD will be made mandatory based on the circulars issued previously. In circular 199 in particular, it was clarified that ISD is presently not mandatory. However, it will be made mandatory in future. So accordingly, in Finance Act 2024, they brought out the relevant changes in the ISD mechanism, which made it mandatory. Accordingly, notification 12 of 24 was issued to give effect to the changes that was proposed by the GST Council in its 50th meeting. And from 1st April 2025, that is from 3 months from now, ISD is going to be made mandatory. And in the previous amendment, that is in notification 12 of 24, there were some amendments made which required the ISD to distribute common credits even for transactions where tax was payable under reverse charge by the recipient. So the amendment was only referring to section 9.3 and 9.4 of the CGST Act, and out of inadvertence, section 5.3 and 5.4 of the IGST Act were not included. So now with this proposed amendment, they are also proposing to include interstate transactions where the tax is payable under reverse charge by the recipient, so that all the transactions which are required to be all the input services which are common and which are required to be distributed to uh, to the states from where the outward supply is made are actually routed through ISD, and the distribution happens in a uniform and proper mechanism. And therefore, this amendment is proposed basically to streamline all the transactions where tax is payable under reverse charge, be it interstate or intrastate. And this is going to be made effective from 1st April 2025. So companies which have registrations in multiple states are required to be mindful of this change and start looking at their preparedness for implementing ISD from 1st April 25. The last aspect from GST is in context of supply of goods which are warehoused in SEZ or FTWZ. So SEZ deems the territory in the special economic zone or free trade warehousing zone to be a designated area outside the country. And therefore, what is mandated from GST perspective, particularly from the taxability of transactions for import of goods or supply of goods by SEZ is when the goods are supplied by SEZ, it is treated as zero rated. And similarly, when the goods are supplied to SEZ, it is treated as zero rated. But when it comes to supply of goods from SEZ to any person before its clearance for home consumption or before its export, earlier there was a confusion as to whether tax is payable or not. But now the government has introduced clause 8AA in Schedule 3 of the CGST Act, basis which supply of goods from SEZ to any customer, be it in DTA or in export market, such transactions will be considered neither a supply of goods nor a supply of services. And this is going to be made retrospectively applicable from July 2017 itself. So some of the taxpayers who already paid taxes on such transactions, the government has come out with a clarification to say that taxpayers who have paid the taxes from July 17 to say April 2025 will not be eligible to claim refund of the taxes that are going to be paid, that have already been paid. And also, this proposal of restricting the refund may be subject to judicial scrutiny, because if the incidence has not been passed on to the customer and if it is borne by the SEZ unit itself, then they are eligible for going for refund. And therefore, it is to be seen whether this proposal of restricting the refund can be challenged before the court. And in such cases, judicial scrutiny may be required. So with this, we come to the end for discussions on the GST related amendments. We'll now start the discussions from customs laws. Chitrat, you can continue.
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yeah,
I
it
hope
is
it's
visible.
Yes.
Siddharth, I request you to please be very brief because we hardly have another 5, 6, 7 minutes to close.
Sure. So, thank you, Brijesh sir, for lucidly explaining the changes brought in by budget 25-26 on the GST front. On the customs front, there are only few key changes which have happened under this budget. One of the main changes is under provisional assessment, which is Section 18 of the Customs Act. So far, there was no clear-cut timeline prescribed for conclusion of provision assessment under Section 18. Given this particular loophole, to plug this, the government has decided to introduce a clear-cut timeline of 2 years for conclusion of provisional assessment and conversion of thereof in the final assessment. This period of 2 years can further be extended to 1 more year, given there are proper approvals from Principal Commissioner or Commissioner of Customs. And for the provisional assessments which are pending as on date, the time limit for this 2 years will be reckoned from the date when the finance bill is signed off by the President. Now, there are few exceptions wherein the department cannot adhere to this particular 2 year time period. There are quite few generic exceptions, but one of the main exception is uh, suppose in case where an appeal in a similar matter of the same person or any other person is pending before any appellate tribunal or High Court or Supreme Court. So the department can potentially use one of these exceptions to extend the timeline beyond 2 years. The machinery provisions are yet to be notified under this particular section. The next key change which has been introduced is in a form of new section, section 18A, which is inserted after section 18. This new section 18A is sort of a second chance, wherein after import or export, if an importer, I'm speaking from the perspective of importer, it is applicable to the exporter as well. So after import, suppose the importer finds out that there are some issues in the bill of entry, maybe he forgot to take benefit of exemption notification or he short paid the duty. So even after home clearance, he can file a revision under section 18A and complete the self-assessment again. And if it is found out that he has short paid the duty, he can pay that short duty along with interest, but there won't be any penalty. And in case he has already paid excess duty, this revision in the entry would be deemed to be a refund application under section 27 of the Customs Act. Now, the self-assessment would be verified by the proper officer. And also, again, there is an exception to application of section 18A. That is, if an audit, seizure, or summons, etc., has already been initiated against that importer in respect of the same subject matter, then he cannot apply for revision under section 18A. The machinery provisions with respect to the form, manner, time limit within which revision can be applied for is yet to be notified. Now, consequent to introduction of section 18A, there are corresponding amendments in section 27, which is for refund, which states that limitation of 1 year will be applicable in cases of refund which are arising out of section 149, which is amendment of bill of entry, and as well as refunds which are arising out of section 18A, which is a newly inserted section. On the recovery front, there is an amendment in section 28 as well. The department can recover the duties arising out of revision within a period of 2 years, basically from the date when the payment has been made by the importer. Then, as the settlement commission is supposed to be phased out, briefly, there will be no new application post 31st March 2025, and all the pending application will be handled by the interim board. All other powers of settlement commission will be vested with the interim board. One of the major important amendments which has happened is in terms of import of goods at concessional rate or for specified and use rules. So basically, these rules are attached to any concessional benefit under any notification, which until now required you to use the imported goods within 6 months to manufacture the finished goods. So there was a clear-cut prescribed time limit, but somehow these 6 months were not enough to put in the use of those imported goods. Therefore, the government has considered this particular issue, and they have extended the timelines from 6 months to 1 year. So within 1 year, you can still use the goods, put it to the end use. Also, another major amendment within these particular rules is uh, quarterly the quarterly compliances or the statements which had to be filed with it, which was monthly, now has been changed into quarterly. We have also seen few significant rate movements. There has been reduction of 7 tariff rates in terms of capital goods, specifically for lithium-ion battery for EVs and lithium-ion battery for mobile phones. 35 and 28 capital goods respectively have been put into the nil category in terms of duty, which is a welcoming move. And generally speaking, in terms of tariff rates, there has been some very slight increase in tariff rates, few decrease in tariff rates, and most of them have remained same, because what the government has technically did is they have somewhere reduced SWS, social welfare surcharge, and introduced AITC for the same goods. So these are the very brief changes from the customs perspective. Request Mr. Brijesh to quickly give concluding remarks on the IDT budget changes.
Yeah, thank you, Chitra. So we come to the end of the budget session. We'll just conclude it with one last slide relating to the hits and misses and the way forward. So as far as this budget is concerned, from the indirect tax standpoint, the budget has been taken by the industry as well as by the taxpayers very positively. It aims at promoting Make in India and also enhances the ease of doing business. That has been the ask from the industry for years now. If we have a look at the rate changes, there's been no steep increase in the rate of customs duty. GST, obviously, there's no change in the rate of any of the goods or services. And the amendment also that are brought in are aimed at ending certain disputes or enhancing the transparency, which is, in our view, a good way to bring out confidence in the industry and also, like what Mr. Ranina was indicating, increase the spendings. Certain misses that we identify in the budget, it was expected that under customs law, amnesty scheme will be introduced to end certain legacy or matters that are before various courts, be it at tribunal or at high courts. So we were expecting that the government will come out with an amnesty scheme for customs, which has been requested by the industry for years now. But we were expecting something this year. Nothing of that sort has been indicated in the budget. Also, in the previous budget, that is in 2022, the government had proposed to introduce a DESH bill, which will replace the existing SEZ Act. So presently, DESH bill is not being considered uh, for implementation immediately, but it is expected that over coming years, the SEZ Act will be replaced with this DESH Act based on the industry presentation as well as inputs. Also, the government had brought out draft central excise bill for public inputs earlier this year. It was expected that the government will place the bill in this budget session for its enactment, but as of now, there is no update or no development on this as well. So these are some of the misses that we identify with this B&R session. We thank WTC. We also thank all the participants for their patience in hearing us out, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you have from Indirect Tax standpoint.
Thank you, Brijesh and the team. In fact, that was quite helpful. Many of the participants were asking for your PowerPoint. So what we will do is we will just complete this and then we'll mail it to you. So please remember to leave your email ID. If you have registered, we'll use that. Otherwise, just text it to me on WhatsApp. You have my number. So let me just go back to Ranina, sir. Sir, the big $1 billion question here after the budget. Of course, you said the highlight was on the income tax front, but the big $1 billion question is, which regime is going to stay? Is it the new or the old? Sir, you're on mute.
The new regime is definitely going to get a lot of traction. Already, I think 67% have shifted to the new regime. And now with this 12 lakh exemption limit, plus, as I said, much more, 75,000 for standard deduction, another 50,000 or say 87,000 for, NPS. I think it is certainly good. I think 90% of the people will shift to the new tax regime. And in the next 2 years, I think the old tax regime will become virtually defunct.
Yes, sir. And sir, we understand that the reduction in the income tax or the extension of the slab up to 12 lakhs is a clear indication that government wants people to spend, particularly the middle level income levels, to spend more and boost consumption. And of course, in another couple of months, we also expect the RBI, to announce their revision of rates. I don't know whether it will happen because there was some substantial, incentives that have been given in the budget. And anyway, that is also expected, and you also hinted it out when you spoke about, the reasons to save more. The question is, sir, once we have more, income, dispensable income with people, they will obviously start to spend more, and that's exactly what government is asking for. Would that lead to an inflation?
No, I don't think so, because if goods are going to be produced to match the demand, then there'll be no inflation. But in the short term, possibly there will be. But that only means that industries will now try to, match up the demand. In fact, some of the industries are not working at full capacity. So the capacity utilization will take place immediately without investment in plant and machinery. Immediately they'll get up to 100% of their capacity, and then they'll invest money in plant and machinery. So I don't think it will lead to inflation, because in any case, the goods are available, and if they are not available locally, they will be imported. So maybe initially China and other countries may stand to gain, because if there's a demand for certain goods which are not available in India. But in the course of time, I think the Indian industry will match up.
Thank you, sir. That was a question from Alex and a few others.
But
There's
there's one,
also
Vivek, there's just one point which I wanted to make,
sure, sir.
that in America, the per capita income is about 83,000 US dollars. And the exemption limit for income tax is only $12,875. In India, our GDP, per capita GDP is just about 2,50,000 rupees. And now the exemption is 12 lakhs. So virtually now in India, the middle class is going to be exempt. In America, those even below the annual GDP have to pay tax. In India, it's the other way around. So I just want to bring that into perspective, that our initial exemption limit will be almost 5 times the per capita GDP of India.
Noted, sir. In fact, many have appreciated the way in which you have decoded the budget proposals, and you have shared your thoughts with clarity. And I just wanted to add on to someone who said that of course there's a lot of fluctuations that are happening, and you also spoke about capital markets. But where do you see the rupee heading to?
The rupee, I think, will be on the decline, may head up to 90 rupees. Today it is 86 point something. It may go up to 90. But I would say that it will help exporters, number one. And number two, it will bring in more foreign exchange. For example, a lot of NRIs are now buying properties in India because they're so much cheaper. Because of the 85 rupees they get for a dollar, the Indian property market has become very cheap for them. So again, the weakening of the rupee will help us in being stronger. Secondly, more remittances are coming to India. Today, our remittances are roughly $124 billion, which is the highest we ever had. Not only from the Gulf, but from America and UK. In fact, more remittances are coming from America and UK than from the Gulf today. So a lot of money is flowing into the country. So I don't see anything wrong in the rupee being around 85, 90.
Okay, a couple of questions for Brijesh and team. You spoke about SEZs and you spoke about Deshpil. What is your understanding? You just casually mentioned that Deshpil might not be implemented now, but there are also reports that Deshpil has been scrapped. So, is there anything that you would want to update the audience?
Yeah, there have been news around scrapping of Desh bill because it was not addressing some of the issues that the SEZ units are facing currently. And therefore, at the stage of it being drafted, and when the government was taking inputs from the industry, there were some gaps between what was the expectation from the industry and what the government intends to offer. So the government has to be mindful of the WTO restrictions, that with an intent to promote Indian exports, they cannot subsidize the taxes and other costs just to promote exports. And therefore, the Desh bill has to be drafted in such a way that it doesn't come under the scrutiny of the WTO, particularly the benefits that are given to the exporters. And therefore, with an intent to streamline the requirement of meeting the Indian exporters' requirement, and also to be compliant from the WTO's compliance perspective, the government is carrying out changes, keeping both the stakeholders' requirement in mind. And recently, there has also been news that the government is proposing to bring back Desh Bill based on the industry as well as from the government's recommendations and inputs, and we can expect the Desh bill to be reintroduced.
I want to ask a question on behalf of Mr. K.K. Pillai, who is the Regional Chairman for Export Promotion Council. Now, he wants to ask, if there is anything specific in the budget for MSME and agro-value products who are operating from SEZs.
Particularly for MSME, there's no specific goods or specific services related benefit, but SEZ as a whole has been given this benefit similar to the ones that are given to private bonded warehouses, wherein when the goods are imported for further sale, before its clearance in DTA or to export, if the goods are stored, when they are stored in the SEZ itself, it is now going to be outside the ambit of GST. So this now gives benefit not just to large SEZ, but also to MSMEs and small units who are based out of the special economic zones.
Noted. Ranina sir, a question on the agri sector. In fact, Avinash Chandra Sethi, he was asking, is this budget and the future policies of the government are like doomsday script or end of the road? This is largely for merchant exporters.
You're talking about the agricultural sector?
The agri.
Yeah, the agricultural sector has always been given the right incentives for export, but the only constraint so far was infrastructure. So we could not have movement of goods from the farms to the ports and from the ports to the foreign markets. Now that we are going to have, as you may be aware, a DFC, dedicated freight corridor, where lines will run, railway line will be dedicated only for freight transport. So whole trucks and tempos and even containers will be put on the freight transport, and it will go straight to the JNPT, which is the container port in India, and there it will be exported to the rest of the world. So the constraint is now going to be removed in the next 3 years once the dedicated freight corridor comes into operation. And therefore, I expect the agricultural exports to increase by leaps and bounds. And I won't be surprised if it touches 300 crores, $300 billion. $300 billion of agricultural exports is against $120 billion of agricultural exports during 24-25.
And sir, your thoughts on the energy sector, because that is something that is evolving and growing at an exponential phase, particularly around green energy and renewable energy.
Yeah, the green energy sector, of course, a lot of impetus has been given. They said they're going to set up now nuclear energy. As you know, in England, 70% of electric power is generated by nuclear energy. In India, not even 15%. So there's tremendous scope, and that will help us to reduce the carbon footprint because we'll use less coal. Today, most of the energy is produced from coal. And once we do that, once this nuclear energy is being used, then certainly it will help us to a tremendous extent. Not only that, it will be cheaper, cleaner power.
Absolutely. Today somebody incidentally was saying, nuclear energy is one of the cleanest sources of energy.
Absolutely.
That was quite interesting. Yes. I think, we have a few more questions. If you have the time, and I'll just take it, maybe a couple more.
I don't know.
Again, something on, houses and housing rental incomes. Rajendra wants to ask, as per the proposed IT Act, only 2 houses are free of tax. I would like to know if the third house, even if it is partially owned, whether the owner has to pay the tax.
Yes, he will have to pay tax on what is called the annual value. Annual value is like the standard rent. So if it's kept in unoccupied, then he'll have to pay tax on the annual value of that flat for the third house. So only 2 are currently now. Of course, 2 will be exempt only from the next assessment year. That means from the next financial year. Currently, 1 house plus 1 house subject to certain conditions. Now those conditions have been removed. So without any conditions, from next year, 2 houses will be exempt from the annual value of the property. And therefore, you won't have to pay tax. But let me tell you one thing. If you don't pay the tax, you will not get a deduction for any interest which you have paid on monies borrowed. So my point is that it's better to let it out. I don't know why people want to keep it, let it out. especially if you have borrowed monies, because if you have borrowed monies and paying interest, huge interest, then the interest becomes deductible only against your income, which is taxable. For self-occupied property, interest is deductible only up to 2 lakhs, not beyond that. But if you have rented it out, then the full amount of interest. So what can happen is that the interest may be more than the rent, and therefore it will be a loss under the head income from house property. And that loss can be set off in the same financial year against income under any other head.
Another question is from Rupal Haria. She says, she asked, kindly explain AIF taxation, the change in heads of income, that is from business income head to capital gain head. But it is main objective of the company that they are having only AIF. Then whether they can offer income under the head capital gain.
Well, that depends on the facts of the case. We'll have to examine the facts, and if I can't answer it outright.
Understood.
But you can, you see, if you are trading in securities or shares, that is normally treated as business income. But if you're an investor, so many companies, many trusts have two portfolios: investment portfolio, trading portfolio. So you categorize as investment portfolio, you will be liable to tax as capital gains. But if it's business portfolio, you'll have to pay tax as business income.
Thank you. Brijesh, Mary wants to clarify, is Udyam credit card only for manufacturers?
Yeah, it is for the manufacturers.
Okay. Maybe, sir, I will take one last question from Chandra Mohan Joshi. With capital to output ratio being 4:1 and savings to GDP ratio being approximately 30%, how would India dream of double-digit growth?
Well, the double-digit growth will come out of investments and consumption, because more and more goods are going to be produced, more and more goods are going to be exported, and more income is going to be earned by the services sector. Don't forget, services sector today is still almost 55% of the total GDP. So the growth comes from the services sector. And a lot of people are today getting into the services sector instead of manufacturing. Manufacturing sector, in fact, has been shrinking from 30% to 28%. So the growth will come from the services sector, and that is where the demography of India comes in. This is why I said a lot of money is being made by people who are working in GCCs, GTCs, and others. That is where the growth is going to come from. And that is why the whole world is looking at India. So exports plus agricultural sector plus services sector, all three put together will give us a 10% rate of growth.
With that, we conclude. Thank you once again, all the speakers. Thank you. Special thanks to Homi Ranina, sir, for
My
finding
pleasure.
time and being with us this year as well. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, and I'm sure the participants would have also appreciated it. The same goes to Brijesh and Chitrat for sharing your insights on the subject. Of course, we'll have to share the PowerPoint deck with them. I will get back to you. And participants, if you have any queries, please reach out to us. We will, in the PowerPoint deck, we will have Brijesh and Chitrat's coordinates. You can connect with them for your future queries as well. So I thank Homi sir, our speakers, our partners from Khaitan and Co, from FIEO and Forum of Free Enterprises, and all the participants for joining us today. You all have a wonderful evening. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.